Hello and welcome to episode number 132 of Retro Encounter, RPG fans' podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and I'm your host for today, and I'm joined by two guests that joined me for a different Zelda episode 2 weeks ago. The first of whom is Stephanie Sybydlo.
Woo!
Oh, so you're one of those woo girls, Steph. I see.
I didn't have anything clever, so I just thought I'd cheer like there's an audience.
I saw an episode of How I Met Your Mother all about that, just many years ago, but we're definitely not here to talk about sitcoms that got really bad towards the end. But we are also joined by Nathan Lee. You know,
I like us.
that sound effect is very good, and I was really tickled when in Breath of the Wild they did a super slowed down version of that for when you get the Master Sword.
Did they?
They did. Yeah.
I didn't catch that.
No, they like stretched that out to 10 full seconds for when you hold up the Master Sword and finally get it. It's awesome. But
I love how classy the series is about doing things like that. Like just play the Zelda lullaby in reverse, okay? And put it to an orchestra, and there you go. Skyward Sword got its main theme.
Listeners, if you hadn't already noticed, we are in the middle of Zelda month here at Retro Encounter. We are doing 4 Zelda episodes in a row in the month of April. This is the third of those 4.
You've been playing a lot of Zelda games between us.
I have, yeah. God, I've done 3 on the year so far. I'm near the end of a couple, and I think I'm probably gonna end up playing 5 or 6. I'm just on a Zelda kick in 2018.
My eyes are just really used to looking at green right now. It's actually very comforting and soothing.
This episode is going to be similar to 2 weeks ago in that we're going to be discussing all the games in the series. Like Steph mentioned, we're probably going to be jumping from game to game and reference to reference all the time, so it might get confusing if you haven't played many of the Zelda games. But unlike that episode where we sort of discussed several games and then picked a favorite, we're just going to be talking about what makes Zelda Zelda, what are the bests and worsts of like Zelda tradition, like how Zelda is like references itself and subverts its own formulas. Basically, we're going to be a little analytical and a little, oh my god, remember this, oh my god, remember that, I totally remember this, totally forgot about that. This episode is going to be a little bit flying by the seat of our pants, a little bit disorganized, but it is going to be about The Legend of Zelda. So, Nathan, I'm going to pick on you immediately. Right. Like, what do you think is either a specific game or a specific thing or a concept that just speaks to what Zelda is for you? Like, when you think of what makes a Zelda game, even a game that isn't Zelda, like when you think of Okami or Darksiders or something, what about those games just speaks to you as being Zelda?
Zelda formula to me is kind of, you start off like this like little humble character, and then like over the course of the journey you're asked to go on this grand adventure over over a huge portion of the game, and you get your items and you get your power-ups over the course of the game, and that you basically grow as a character, and then you see your character evolve. For me, that's what Zelda is.
Heck, to me, that's what a Japanese RPG is a lot of the time. But
well, Zelda's an RPG, right?
Yeah, but no, that's a conversation we're not going to have.
Now it is. It officially is now. No, there's old like Japanese guidebook literature that does specifically call it an RPG as well. So you know what? I'm sticking to that.
We're not going to get into that into detail. I mean, like RPG fans' official stance is that we've been covering Zelda a long time, so we're going to continue to do it. One
thing I say is that the more we can cover, the better, and I think this is just a fun series that a lot of especially RPG fans will still appreciate, so I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, and also recently,
the more we get to enjoy,
recently RPG fans we've been diversifying our game coverage a lot recently. We covered an Assassin's Creed game. We started covering Okami a little bit. And a Monster Hunter game, all within the same 3 or 4 months. So, like, yeah, recent RPG fan we're not just about RPGs anymore. We're about what we like and what we think our audience might like. So if anyone, hassles us on Twitter about something not being an RPG, we really don't care.
And you know what? I like RPG elements. If it's got RPG elements, I say good enough. I think it's something a lot of RPG fans will still like. In which case, I think a lot of us still do like this series because
Yeah, but Nathan was onto something there. Even though the idea of starting small and with only 3 hearts to your name and an empty inventory, and
Mm-hmm.
then like becoming a hero and becoming this this like arsenal of uh of items and magic by the end of the game, that feeling of progress and feeling of growth is something that I think of as key to Zelda and key to RPGs in general. Like, I mean, I am a humble man that loves seeing numbers get incrementally larger, which is part of why I love Disgaea, among other things. So
Mm-hmm.
just like that feeling of growth and feeling of efficacy is awesome in a lot of games, including Zelda. Steph, same sort of open-ended question to you. What is a thing or maybe things that you think really makes a Zelda game and makes you think of Zelda when you see it in other games?
The art, the
Mm.
direction, the look, the sound. Yeah, to me it's like basically almost everything else. It's usually about a boy with a sword, but I always like the kind of world that they wrap it up in. That makes every Zelda game feel like Zelda. They know how to add elements that make it kind of feel like homey within its own universe.
Right on. And I mean, just to let's stick into the 2000s for an example. I mean, Wind Waker, uh,
Ocarina,
uh,
no, sorry,
Wind Waker,
Majora's Mask.
Twilight Princess,
yeah,
and Skyward Sword are 3 definite Zelda games that have wildly different tones, wildly different approaches to art, but a lot of the same Zelda elements and Zelda traditions in them, and each of them like references old games in a different or unusual way. Like
for
I
the
mean,
most part, they operate on the same kind of design philosophy, though.
yes,
There's always a lot
Yeah.
of green. There's always a legend. There's a hero. There's a villain. So I like that. I think it was always meant to be that kind of very basic good versus evil story. And I think that's why they kind of push that angle of Link versus Ganon and all that all the time. But I like that they do kind of connect them in the way, despite the different worlds, the different looks, etc.
yeah. Zelda has had a wide variety of looks over the years, but to me personally, answering that question that I directed to both of you, for me Zelda is about the mechanics. It's about like exploring an overworld, finding dungeons, like solving the puzzles in the dungeons, and then with each new discovery and each new dungeon, you get more items, more hearts, more everything, and with some of those dungeons and worlds being mandatory and some of them being totally optional, and and like Steph said, it's wrapped in this design philosophy both visually and orally. That's AURA, not ORA. That is sort of evolved with the series over the decades. Now,
I
uh,
think with that, we actually all gave a slightly different answer.
yeah, and I think all 3 of those are pieces to the Zelda puzzles, and there is no wrong answer for the question what is Zelda or what does Zelda mean to you. So and I'm sort of glad that we have 3 different perspectives coming here, even though 2 of those perspectives are Canadian. This might be our most Canadian episode ever, now that I think about it. So I mean, even though of course the Zelda's design philosophy has changed over the years, it does have a formula that it sticks to at least some of the time. And I in my show notes here, when I thought about this a little bit, I sort of picked out 3 early Zelda games that I think did the most to establish that formula. You have the original Zelda, A Link to the Past, and Ocarina of Time. Because Zelda 1, of course, for reasons that Rob Rogan mentioned 2 weeks ago, is very important. It established like the basic formula of map, dungeon, Ganon that basically all of the Zelda games follow. A Link to the Past is the first one that had sort of a more directed quest and and had the game in 2 phases with the 3.5 early dungeons
Yeah,
and then 8 and then sort of 8 later dungeons.
the 5 big boys.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And then Ocarina of Time, I think, added more to the character and to the plot of Zelda than any game that came before it, because it established
It
the
established, yeah, a better character, I think, because that's one thing Link to the Past barely had any
mhm.
of. Was everyone was just an NPC basically.
Yeah, Ocarina of Time gives Link more of a personality. It
Uh,
introduces the
a good
Gyarados, and the Gorons, and fleshes out the Zoras much more,
like
and sort of
between Link to the Past and Between Worlds, like the sages were just kind of random NPCs. Between
right,
now,
yeah.
where they actually Link Between Worlds, sorry, where they were each a different character, the
Yeah,
name, the
yeah. Ocarina of
characters.
Time.
Yeah.
They added mystique to the lore of Zelda by giving more more weight to what the sages were and what the hero is, and adding personalities to live in all of the different biomes of Zelda. Because I mean, in the Link to the Past, you basically just have people in Kakariko Village, and they're boring, and the rest of the world is only inhabited by people in caves and monsters. But in Ocarina of Time, the Zelda was a living, breathing world with different folks living in every part of the world, and I think really added sort of character to the Zelda formula. So Nathan, do you think uh, I guess maybe trying to stay a little bit in the first half of the Zelda series, what do you think is something that one game did that that was really important and carried over to later games, just for establishing what Zelda is?
Uh, it probably would be Ocarina of Time, just because this is the one that kind of laid down the formula for everything. Because of how successful it was, Nintendo kind of just stuck with Ocarina of Time's general formula.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
is there something about Ocarina of Time that maybe I didn't go over in detail that you think is really important for future Zelda?
No, you covered it pretty well, I think.
All right. Uh, Steph,
But
yeah, do you have an example of something in an early Zelda that you always see carried over to later games?
I think the biggest important one was like how they very proudly took the design philosophy in the very first Zelda and expanded that in Breath of the Wild. And that was really important at a time
Hmm.
when the series was starting to feel very stagnant. I think now that everything's been kind of restarted, we can go back and look at the series a bit more with a more refreshed feeling, for lack of better words, because Breath of the Wild kind of restarted what they were doing. But yeah, like it was getting a little bit stagnant with that kind of typical Zelda Link Ganon formula.
Yeah, I think it was map, dungeon, Zelda Ganon is basically
Yeah.
how most Zelda games went. But
mhm.
and Breath of the Wild was a breath of fresh air, in several ways. But we can talk about that a little later. Uh, One thing that I think that about Ocarina of Time that I might have remarked on this 2 years ago, and I apologize. I'm 2 years ago, 2 weeks ago, and I apologize if that's the case. Is how they made the music part of the gameplay with and the mechanic of the ocarina of playing songs that you hear around the rest of the game and giving power to those songs and having you learn songs from hearing them is really great. And also, like, those songs on the ocarina of in the ocarina from Ocarina of Time come back in later games,
Yeah.
and it maybe
Mhm.
even take on different meanings in later games. Like you talked about how the theme decides to Skyward Sword is Zelda's lullaby played in reverse, and I think what is it? I think Midna's theme in Twilight Princess is also a song from Ocarina of Time placed in a minor key and slowed down, or that just might be Midna's lament is what I'm thinking of.
I know they did the final dungeon theme for Link Between Worlds was another one of those actually.
Hmm.
I think it was a reverse version of the Hyrule Castle theme.
Yeah, there's a lot of music in A Link Between Worlds that is adapted or somehow changed from A Link to the Past, because I mean those two games basically share a setting, and
There's a
I
lot of attention to detail in the artistry of these games,
oh
like
yeah.
to kind of
Mhm.
bring them together like that. And yeah, and of course in the music. I do like the like you were kind of talking about the ocarina, and I love how that really gets the player involved in a different way. You know, I
Yeah,
don't know.
and
It's kind of fun to play an instrument, right? And they
hmm
actually just make it into a gameplay mechanic, so it's a lot of fun.
yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that's part of why Ocarina of Time's music mechanic is so good. And I mean, he's talking about how Zelda loves referencing itself. I mean, Wind Waker is explicitly a post-apocalypse version of some timeline out of Ocarina of Time, and
Yeah.
Twilight Princess literally has one of its dungeons as the Temple of Time from Ocarina of Time. And let's see, I think the names of the sages in Ocarina of Time come from towns in Zelda 2, and four of the sages in Ocarina of Time and Wind Waker are the names of the four divine beasts in Breath of the Wild,
Yeah.
or changed around a little bit.
Oh,
Like,
Breath of the Wild had a lot of fun with its
oh yeah,
location names. Like
Yeah,
they really
so
did.
I'm sure
many
the
references. And I think it's really sweet though. Like a lot of the Zora one where they have like a very strong, monarchy thing going on has like a lot of their rulers named. So I think that's really cute and clever.
Yeah, and
Um,
if you check out the Zora statues on the path up to the Zora Kingdom, they talk about a lot of Zora monarchs of the past, and I think a few of them are sort of like abbreviated versions of what happened to certain Zora monarchs in older Zelda games. But like I mean, we're not going to talk about the Zelda timeline much here because I don't want to want to get an aneurysm. But Breath of the Wild does a very cool thing. It feels like a Zelda timeline reset because I don't know if it fits into any one timeline because it references all of the games in some more subtle and some more specific ways. And also, there's the thing in Wind Waker where certain species were supposed to have evolved from others, but they're almost all present in Breath of the Wild. So Breath of the Wild is such a cool celebration of Zelda, and also in a way taking Zelda back to its roots and doing some totally new things. Breath of the Wild is insane, but um, I think we've talked enough about the Zelda formula. There are some Zelda games that absolutely do not give a rat's ass about the formula or like respecting a pattern that was established by a previous game. And probably first on that list is Majora's Mask. And I know both of you enjoy Majora's Mask very much. So Nathan, what do you think is one or two things about Majora's Mask that it does differently from Ocarina of Time that make Majora's Mask special? Excuse me. Special. I can't speak today.
You should have done those vocal exercises more.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I couldn't say the word specific and I couldn't say the word naive well at all, and I would struggle with both of them until it just stopped happening. But anyway, Nate, Majora's Mask, go.
Right, so one of the first things about Majora's Mask is the kind of subverts the formula is that there's no Ganon. This is the part. I think this is it's one of the few games without Ganon as the main villain. Instead, it's the Majora who's the main villain.
And
So that's
nobody
one.
missed him.
Nobody missed Ganon.
Just for once, it was nice. It's not like
Yeah,
I'm saying Ganon's a bad villain, but I do love when they take a break from him, and that's actually one of my disappointments with Breath of the Wild. For all the good it does, is it just kind of brought back Ganon in an even more arbitrary way.
yeah, that was pretty arbitrary in Breath of the Wild. It's just like, oh, it's just Ganon, and
Yeah.
then
Yeah, and even some of the games without Ganon, like A Link Between Worlds and Link's Awakening, have the villains basically turn into some Ganon-like thing at the end anyway. So you're still kind of fighting Ganon.
Yeah, so Yuga felt like a real cop out. I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, like I'm not. Yeah, like Yuga is the main villain present for all of Link Between Worlds. He's a pretty good villain, but then he sort of takes on Ganon's powers, and one of the phases of his boss fight is basically Ganon. And when you
Tell me you don't love like the final. Sorry, I know this is the whole point though.
yeah, we're going crazy.
in Link Between Worlds, when you start that final boss, it kind of plays a few of those SNES notes that.
And I love how I mean, a lot of games have Link firing light arrows into Ganon to defeat him.
Yeah.
But I love the hieroglyphics version of the light arrow in Link Between Worlds.
It looks so glorious. It was like a moving painting.
Yeah, it's great.
Oh, it's so gorgeous.
So yeah, back to Majora's Mask and Nathan. Sorry, we keep derailing the train, man.
it's all right. So, probably the other thing is they brought back the Ocarina, but instead you use it to kind of, well, I suppose it's the same kind of way it's used in the Ocarina of Time. You use it to alter the world because in Majora's Mask, there's only 3 days you have before the world gets destroyed. So you have to play the Song of Time in order to reset the world. The thing is the only game that's ever done that, where it's giving you like a specific time limit, and then you have to kind of work your way around the time limit.
It took such a big risk, and it really succeeded. I think that is probably the one that took the most chances and probably succeeded the most for it.
Yeah, Majora's Mask could easily have failed because of that one mechanic that they introduced.
And
I don't think it would have failed because it kind of does have Zelda on the front cover.
It does, but you know, you never know when something might destroy the franchise. Almost like Skyward Sword kind of did. Like a lot of fans really weren't happy with Skyward Sword, so
some will swear by it, man. They will fight you forever on that.
Yeah. I don't understand the fan reaction to Skyward Sword. I haven't played it, so this is not an informed opinion. But I remember seeing like really high reviews and also really angry reactions. I think it might even be more confusing than the reactions to Wind Waker, because like I honestly have no idea whether the Zelda fandom loves or hates Skyward Sword. I do not know.
Yeah, I think it has mostly to do with the motion controls. I think that's basically the sticking point.
At first, I loved it. Then as I went on, I really started to dislike it. Now I'm just kind of cooled off about it by now. I think it's pretty good, but I don't know how well it's gonna age.
Yeah, plus it is very formulaic. It's probably the most formulaic Zelda
Yeah,
out of all.
and the hand
Oh
holding,
my.
like the hand, like as good as it all looks for and all that, man, the hand holding was on another level.
Yeah.
It'll be like 200 redundant item explanations by the time you reach the
You
end of the
just
game.
be walking along and Fi pops out and just like, your Wii battery's low. It's just like,
Oh
thanks,
my
Fi.
god. Yeah, and she starts with that when you're only about halfway through. It's not that it's even low. It's like it's half. It's still good to go for a long, like 10 hours.
There's a 93.1% chance Fi will appear and tell you something that's completely useless.
There are literally a few instances where she will repeat something said literally moments ago.
You are not selling me on Skyward Sword.
It's really fun, and the puzzles are very fun, and the
Like,
sword fighting mechanic is very clever, and all the motion controls are very well implemented. It's just got a few really bad hand-holding faults.
yeah, and like I mentioned in the favorite Zelda, it's got some of the best dungeons in the series.
Totally.
Right, now speaking of those dungeons, again, I've only played the first, I think, 3 or so hours of Majora's Mask. It does have some dungeons, I'm pretty sure I remember, and but
Yeah.
are those dungeons sort of similar to older ones where, you go in, you find keys, you find a special item, and then the special item helps you solve puzzles in the rest of the dungeon?
Yeah, it's generally the same. You basically go
Okay.
into the dungeon, you grab the item that helps you beat the dungeon. So when you go back in time, you get to keep all the important stuff. So that's the way they keep you. So you can go through halfway through the dungeon, get the item, then you can go back in time and you still have your stuff. So you could do that. You can tackle dungeons a bunch of ways in Majora's Mask to get
Yeah.
another time of it.
So, but if you complete the dungeon in one 3-day cycle and then you're reset to the beginning, is the dungeon still beaten, or do you have to do it again?
You have to beat the
No,
boss again.
Okay.
just the
But
boss.
but
So
but
they
you can
actually
you
do
can
make that part easy.
but
Yeah.
you can cruise through the dungeon because you probably already have the item and the boss key or
No, no,
something.
Oh no,
Oh.
no. Like you know how SNES Zelda gives you a portal at the start of it to
Oh,
go to
okay,
the
even
midpoint.
better. Okay, I
They
got you.
yeah,
basically do
Hmm.
that, but final boss.
Makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Because each boss guard has an area change. So basically,
yeah.
the first area you go to, there's poison water. So once you beat the boss, the water becomes normal.
It's very fortunate that the funnest boss is probably the one you'll have to be beating over the most again.
Oh, goat. Yeah, goat's the
Yeah.
best.
So it's like, oh, I got to do that again. All right, it's not the
Uh,
worst, I guess.
But you only have to do that for like the
The best
critical
sword, I think, right?
like the critical path part of the game. Like you don't like if you're
It's
doing a
all side
yeah, if you're
quests,
doing a
yeah.
if you're doing a cycle just for side quests, you don't have to go and beat the bosses. Only for
oh no, you do sometimes. If you want you do a
okay,
specific side quest, but it needs to happen after the boss
sure.
is dead, then you have to do the boss again.
Basically, from what I'm understanding, Majora's Mask is just a bunch of complicated event flagging that but you can start from the beginning at any time you want.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's about no, that's basically what it is, right? It's got an interesting cycle. Like for the time crunch they made Majora's Mask on, that game should not have been as good as it amazingly turned out to be.
Hmm.
But since we're talking sort of about like dungeon structure, one thing I think is great to talk about Skyward Sword, since we did just bash it a lot, is the dungeons feel a lot more three-dimensional because like you have to kind of explore them in a much different way, in a very more hands-on way, usually,
Hmm.
literally, because
Yeah.
the wag stick controls and all that. So like it's actually really fun to like send your beetle out and kind of help control it, or use a whip to actually literally like chuck at the computer
Yeah.
at the screen, and even the final boss key is a lot of fun where you have to actually kind of maneuver it to find which way it fits into the slot.
Oh,
I think
crazy.
it's actually really fun. You're right, the dungeons are a ton of fun, and despite my complaints, Skyward Sword's dungeons are pretty tip top.
Now, now I adore Zelda dungeons. I don't know if I mentioned this 2 weeks ago, but sometimes I think of Zelda games in terms of their dungeons and their items. Like, oh, you know,
Mm.
let's see, Link's Awakening is the game with Eagle Tower and the first one with the Rock's Feather, and Oracle of Seasons is the one with Rock's Cape and the Magnet Gloves.
Oracle
So
of Seasons and Ages have some of the best items
they
for
have
Zelda.
some awesome items. But so I often I think of games in terms of my favorite dungeons and items. So we mentioned that in a more typical Zelda game, the dungeon is you do the first half of the dungeon, you fight a mid boss, you get the dungeon's specific item, you solve puzzles with that item, get the boss key, then fight the dungeon boss, and usually that the dungeon item is involved in that boss fight. But That's not true for every Zelda game, and let's go back to a game we've talked about a lot already the past month. In Breath of the Wild, they really blow up the Zelda dungeon system in a way that I don't always love. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people agree with that.
yeah, okay. So,
Yeah.
and now I'm gonna just explain it briefly, even though many of our listeners, but maybe not all, quite understand how dungeons in Breath of the Wild go. Breath of the Wild has 120 dungeons called shrines and 4 dungeons called divine beasts. And the shrines are basically just usually 1 or 2 or 3 rooms where you solve a couple puzzles, and then at the end of the shrine you get an item called oh shoot, I think it's a spirit fragment or
Spirit Orb, I think.
spirit orb. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah.
you get an item called a spirit orb at the
Might as
end.
well be a fragment though, because
Yeah.
you need what, 4 to make a
120.
difference.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And
or
then
them,
and
yeah.
then and then at a goddess statue in a couple places in the game, you can trade 4 spirit orbs for either a heart container or a stamina container. Maybe it's called something else. I apologize. But the
Yeah.
but and there's 120 of those, and only a handful of them are mandatory. Like maybe 5 or 6. Like the four in the starting area you have to do to leave the starting area. But other than that, I don't. There's a you I don't know if you have to do any more shrines beyond those.
I
And
don't
also
think you
you
can.
usually hidden in the shrine there's a treasure chest that has some rupees or a nice weapon or something. So there's 120 of those, and completing all of them is and locating them can be very tricky. And sometimes the quest to open up a shrine is so complicated that the shrine is just a congratulations, finding us was difficult. Finding the shrine was difficult enough. Here's your spirit orb, but
I don't know. See, but I always hate that. I'm torn between like giving them the benefit of the doubt or feeling like that's a cop out.
I don't think
I
it's a
So-
cop out.
Sometimes
So some of
you
those
have to do the
quests are so
puzzles in order to
convoluted.
do.
It's not a
Yeah.
comp out. I accept it.
Yeah, yeah, okay. They did have a lot of work cut out for them in Breath of the Wild. So like it's one of those things where it's like some parts of the dungeon I don't like, but I still think they had a great idea.
Yeah, but anyway, those
Sure.
shrines. I mean, a lot of them do require special techniques that Link learns in the first area.
Yeah.
Like one of the skills you get early on is a magnetism power called magnesis, and some dungeons are just all about using magnesis to solve the puzzle, and
I
some
like
of them are.
how yeah, they bring that out right away. Like these very very rudimentary kind of tools they give you. They bring
Yep,
them out right away and they're yours for the entire game and they're yours like catch free.
yep. They basically teach you 4 spells, give you a shield and a bow, and then you use your bow and your shield and those spells for the whole game, and they're quite versatile a lot of the time. But also, in addition to the 120 shrines, there are 4 divine beasts, which are giant, like ancient tech, steampunk, or I don't know, like ancient punk, giant animals whom you have to first sort of slow down or tame in a way. Like you have to they might have
Yeah, they're out of control, and you gotta do your kind of main quest to help them out, so they can be static and relaxed and docile, and then you can go in there, fight the evil, and yay, win, and get some superpower,
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah, expanding on that a little bit, you have to sort of battle them from the outside so that they slow down and you can enter them. And then once you're inside the beast, you have to just find a bunch of map consoles and then manipulate the beast's controls to shift around its contents. And it's
They're
there's
pretty
no
exciting.
yeah, it's pretty exciting, and there is a boss battle at
Yeah.
the end. And they're all but
I guess
they
generally I do like when the series brings in like an NPC helper. So I think each of the main quests for that do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
you always get help, yeah.
yeah. You have a helper that helps you get inside, and then you speak to the deceased champion
Yeah.
who was the former master of the divine beast 100 years earlier in the storyline, and they
Yeah.
help you from the inside. So it's like story wise, getting through the divine beasts are cool, but the actual mechanics of solving them, I don't think I like them as much as a regular Zelda dungeon because they feel
No.
Nah,
they don't
they're
have as
probably one of
much.
the
Yeah, they don't have as much personality as like the best dungeons in older Zelda games, even specifically 3D ones.
I
And
did
they're,
love the 3D map though. I thought that was a
the
good
3D
twist.
map is cool, and like
It's
and
it's
like
probably the only intuitive thing I like about it though.
solving the elephant. One of the divine beasts is an elephant, and like basically manipulating its trunk to change
Yeah.
where the water is located is a very cool mechanic. And even though some of the jumping puzzles about the trunk are annoying. but
But it's clever.
yeah, but it's clever, and also the other thing that bothers me that is also true of some older Zelda games, they don't have. I mentioned that the best Zelda dungeons have personality. I don't think, like from the inside, you can really
The
tell the
beige
divine.
beast.
Yeah, you really can't tell them
Yeah.
apart. They're sort of beige and brown, and the sky outside is blue, and that's about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
And well, moving away from Breath of the Wild for a second,
Yeah.
my probably my all-time favorite Zelda game, A Link Between Worlds, also changes the Zelda dungeon formula in a little bit. It's kind of like Breath of the Wild in that most of your advanced skills are available right at the beginning of the game, because A Link Between Worlds, other than your sword and shield, has sort of 9 key items that you can rent from a shop right at the beginning, and all of the dungeons in the game have one of those items as a requirement. Like there's one dungeon in the second half that has a little emblem in front of it that has a bomb symbol, so you know that you need bombs for that dungeon, but it's still optional. And although you have to complete all of the dungeons in A Link Between Worlds to beat the game, these are really good versions of Zelda dungeons. They don't have a key item found in the middle that unlocks the second half of the dungeon because you're having puzzles involving one of your key items throughout the whole dungeon. But I still think they're really tightly designed and awesome, and gives you and that item freedom gives you more options from the get go than previous Zelda games did. I'm not going to say it gives you as much freedom as Breath of the Wild, or that the dungeons are as good or as crafted as the best dungeons in Twilight Princess or Skyward Sword. But I really, really like A Link Between Worlds, and I want the next 2D Zelda to be,
I,
if not just like it, then at least a lot like it.
I sort of touched in my the Zelda feature that we're doing for the site though.
Hmm.
One thing I love about a lot of Link Between Worlds dungeons is something they have is very moderate difficulty. You will never stay stuck on any puzzle too long, and so every dungeon experience is very like nice, fluid, and very satisfying.
Yeah,
Like there's no obnoxious like I found the Goron dungeon in Majora's Mask to be just a little much.
Yeah, that was a little annoying.
Like you had pillars to knock down, you had to fight a few Wizrobes, and they're really annoying in Majora's Mask.
The amount of Wizards you
And
fight in Majora's Mask is ridiculous.
oh, I hated them too. They're the least fun version of that.
and
Yes, you
and
had to knock down a pillar. You had to do a few really risky maneuvers with the Goron rolling, and then do it all in a 3-day cycle. It was
oh
just
wow.
bananas.
We've talked about how dungeons get weird in Zelda games, and also how they've been formulaic for the many years. Starting with you, Steph, do you have like an overall favorite, or maybe your top 2 or 3 favorites in the series that you just smile at every time you think about?
I didn't know this question was coming.
Okay, no, that's unfair. I put you on the spot, so I'll go with I'll say a couple of mine first.
Okay.
I love the Thieves Town dungeon
Yeah.
in A Link to the Past and Link Between Worlds, because in the first one, um, you rescue an imprisoned girl, and if you try to leave the dungeon with her, she freaks out and she doesn't join you. But if you take her to an area of the dungeon where sunlight is breaking through, then she turns into the sunlight hating monster Blind, and she is the final boss. And then you rescue the real imprisoned girl after you defeat Blind. And then in the A Link Between Worlds version of the same dungeon, you meet another girl, but she's not a captured maiden. She's a thief, and both you and her are imprisoned, and you help each other break out of prison and like sneak through the dungeon's traps, and then you fight a new version of the Link
Blind.
to the Past boss. Yeah,
I thought that one was really clever too, though.
and also
Yeah,
you don't rescue the sage in the dungeon at the end. At the end of the dungeon, the thief girl takes you to her house, and she gives you the sage painting that she stole from the dungeon.
It's a nice subversion of the gentle maiden.
Yeah, so I like both of those a lot. Nathan, do you have one or two favorite Zelda dungeons that you have thought about a lot over the years?
I think I mentioned this back in favorite Zelda, but I like the Ancient Cistern one a lot from Skyward
Yeah,
Sword.
Okay.
it's so pretty.
That's
Yeah,
basically the game's water dungeon. 'Cause
It
again,
is.
I
Yeah.
haven't played this one
yeah,
again.
It's gorgeous. Like usually your water dungeons are just kind of dungeony, dark, watery, and all that. But this one is
Dungeony,
gold.
watery,
yeah,
understood.
No, this one is golden and
yeah.
artful. Like It's actually very
you don't
beautiful.
spend a lot of time in the water too, which is nice.
Yeah, yeah, and the final boss or the boss in that area does not deal with any sort of water at all, which is really great
Yeah,
because I didn't like swimming
some
in
of the
Skyward
best
Sword.
as the bosses too. Colossus is so fun.
Oh, that one's a great bout. Yeah, that one's a great fight. um, what's another go? I think a lot of us can agree the Forest Temple is a tip-top Zelda dungeon.
From Ocarina of Time.
Ocarina.
I didn't find the first 3 dungeons in Ocarina of Time really that special either. Like the Deku Tree feels almost like me taking care of some weeds in my backyard. Like it's just so easy. You go there, just run through the
Yeah, I'm
tutorial
basically
mode.
with you. I think that the first three dungeons in the in the Adult Link Hyrule are way better than the previous ones for Kid Zelda.
Oh, completely. Yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah. Like the
Forest,
Goron
Fire,
mines
and
are
Water Temple are good.
incredibly boring, and
Hmm.
the Jabu Jabu is just a very obnoxious dungeon.
Yeah, Jabu Jabu's belly isn't much better in Oracle of Ages. That's one of my least favorite dungeons in that game. But oh man, one dungeon I do like in those handheld Zeldas is the Sword and Shield dungeon from Oracle of Seasons. Like Oracle of Seasons does not have great dungeons until the last three are like way better than the first five. And
Are they
Sword and
just too easy?
the first couple in Seasons are way too easy, but the last ones are challenging enough. And Sword and Shield dungeon's cool because it's in Subrosia, which is sort of a part of the game that you explore bit by bit, and is unlike the rest of the other
They're so
overworld.
charming.
Yeah, and the dungeon's two floors. One floor is shaped like a sword and is a bunch of fire puzzles, and one short floor is shaped like a shield and full
Yeah.
of ice puzzles. And it's a very nice dichotomy, and it's also a big, complicated ass dungeon that's felt
That
like
one
a
was
good
really
cap
good.
off. Yeah, it's a really good one for those handheld
I
games.
like the Oracle of Ages ones though, because they were very puzzle based.
Yeah, the Oracle of Ages dungeons have better puzzles than the Oracle of Seasons
They
ones.
specifically, yeah, require
Hmm.
a tickle of your noodle. That was a
Yeah.
weird way to say that. But yeah.
And then, man, but some of the stuff getting in between the dungeons in those Capcom Zelda games, I don't love as much. Like a lot of Zelda games have really good inter dungeon activities and good side quests, but man, like doing the lizard trading game in Oracle of Ages when they steal all your stuff and finding the
Oh,
library books in Minish Cap, it's like, man, Capcom, come on, this is a
no,
little
no. The
much.
one I hated too was there's a minecart minigame where you have to like kill some enemies and you have to prevent a trolley from hitting the stone. Like
Oh shoot,
it's so dumb and
I'm
it's really annoying.
this is this before inside a dungeon or outside a dungeon?
It's in Oracle of Ages. It's when you're doing the town that it's like lava. It's like a lava town in
Oh,
one
okay.
era.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so you have
there's
to do
one.
something really weird, and it's just incredibly difficult and annoying. The
Oh,
Goron dancing.
I remember the lava town, but I don't remember that puzzle.
Yeah,
It's been a lot of
so
years since I
anyways,
played that one.
the one of the like in between dungeon things that I like doing the most though was in Twilight Princess, going into the third dungeon because it's very long. You basically explore the rest of the Hyrule map, which was like 60% of it more than you had
Right?
explored previously.
Yeah. The third like wolf tracking quest is like this bigger than the first two combined.
Huge,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, I remember
And
that
you
one.
do a whole bunch of events as Wolf Link and as normal Link, and you get a whole bunch of story progress, and you get your horse. Like, yeah, it just everything kind of circles back together again.
So, Nate, do you have a favorite or least favorite, inter dungeon quest?
For favorite is still Andrew Cafe from Majora's Mask.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's a famous side quest.
Can I
I've
also
even
say
seen.
that I
I've read
actually
articles. I haven't played Majora's Mask, but I've read articles just about that side quest.
Yeah,
yeah.
it's great because it takes place over the 3D cycle. You have to reunite these two lovers. Like one of them's been turned to a child, but then you can't really access a lot of this quest until you go through a good portion of the game. You can try and do it, but the game just won't let you. So there's a lot of there's a lot of like stuff you have to do for this quest. Yeah, it takes place over a 3D cycle, and then like right around I think there's 3 hours left in the game, like before the
Oh,
moon crashes. You have to finish the quest.
no, doesn't it literally end in like the last hour? Yeah, it's doing basically the how many seconds left before the moon hits. I think it's like the final 5 minute timer before it actually they actually reunite.
It's after midnight. Like you only have less than 6 hours in game time finish it.
They
It gets pretty
fortunately made it a
stressful.
lot easier in the 3DS games.
Yeah.
Do you at least get an item or something at the end of the side quest that you can carry on to other cycles? Like
It
a,
You
leads
get
to the best item. It will
okay.
lead to the best
you
item.
get a bunch of masks along the way,
Okay, sure.
and
Yeah.
then But then the only like you got I think was it, what mask was it? I forget the name of the mask, but the mask that you get from doing the quest gives you one heart piece.
Well,
There you go.
at least that's something.
Life of a
It's not.
hero.
You get something, at least something beyond a fuzzy feeling in your tummy, which is I was
you get
hoping
that
it was
too.
more than that. Okay.
Gratitude crystals.
Right, right.
Crystallized
Yeah,
gratitude.
gratitude crystals. Those are an item in I think Skyward Sword. I read in the feature.
Yeah, they're really on the nose. Like
You basically
they literally did not think of anything better to exchange for it besides crystals, and it's cute. Like what it
do
is
you
you
trade them
help.
for something? Like I mean,
Yeah,
because I'm a selfish, terrible person. I refuse to get more than I demand more than simply
demand to be
gratitude.
paid. What it is it helps you for a quest. So like in Skyloft late at night, there's some sort of like meek demon living in there, and he's like this kind of really geeky demon who wants to be turned into a human. And so apparently if you collect enough gratitude crystals, his dream will come true. And lo and behold, yeah, it works out. And he looks very like a very geeky human.
Does he at least give you a heart piece for turning into a geeky human?
I forgot the total reward. It's tip of my tongue, but I completely
Okay,
forgot.
but there is some reward. Okay,
There's
okay, good. Because
well, it's like Twilight Princess. They give you a reward for all the pose, and it was not worth the amount of effort to get them. They do that a lot in the series. A lot.
Yeah.
The Korok seeds too.
Yeah, there's a lot of sort of carrot on a
is
stick.
the worst one.
There's a lot of carrots on sticks in the Zelda series, and like the collectibles range from being as silly as gratitude crystals to as mind-numbingly numerous as the Korok seeds to as awesome and satisfying as the Mai, which are still my favorite.
I wish they made having a house in Breath of the Wild and Wind Waker a lot more satisfying than it was.
Yes,
And a
I
few
agree with
games
that.
actually. Yeah, I don't know. There's something fun about owning your own place in a video game.
Yeah, I love that aspect. It's when you put in RPGs, I love it.
Skies of Arcadia, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
You have a village. Like, all right, Ni no Kuni's like being praised for mostly that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of dungeons, a lot of Zelda formula stuff. We've been bouncing around all over the series.
Oh, can we talk about Link, Zelda, and I guess Ganon a bit?
Oh, sure.
I don't know. How do you guys feel about like the whole Triforce Triad?
I don't mind them as concepts, and like wisdom, power, courage are kind of a much better than the John Cena version, hustle, loyalty, respect. But having them as like the three central characters and the an essential like Ganon as the main opponent and Link as the main hero most of the time doesn't really bother me. I wish that I like it when Zelda steps out of her box a little bit and it isn't just
I don't know why I like
Just
that.
cancel the stress.
yeah,
always wish they do more with Zelda. Like that's always my main wish.
yeah.
A lot of people are
like
starting to want to see that too, I think.
I like the Breath of the Wild version of Zelda because like the idea that she's been struggling for 100 years to hold the demons at bay is kind of cool, and they give her a personality.
You can see it.
No.
It's empty.
I mean, it's true.
Yeah, I mean,
it's true, but
memories.
But the memories at least give her a personality and give
I like
her.
that.
And
I actually liked her personality there more than Skyward Sword a little bit.
I like Skyward Sword Zelda. That's probably my favorite Zelda.
I don't know why I'm as iffy about it. I think it's her short bangs and me being a weirdly fashionably opinionated woman, I guess.
I don't know, because she has such a big role in Skyward Sword's story, and
I like that. The one thing that really ticked me off was when she's like, "I've been using you this whole time." It's like, not really. You're just being a saint again.
I mean, but a lot of the time she's just an object.
Yeah.
And
at the beginning of Skyward Sword, though, I thought she was adorable, and I thought that like kind of romance going on between them was like the sweetest thing I've seen.
It's something you never see in Zelda. Like you never see Zelda actually pining after Link.
Yeah.
If I have a least favorite version of Zelda, it might be the one I'm playing right now. In Minish Cap, she is turned into a stone statue in the first 15 minutes, and then she is literally an object that you're trying to rescue for the entire rest of the game. But one of my dreams is for Nintendo to be very, very cheeky, and I've told people this before. Maybe I don't know if I said it in the podcast though. I want them to make a video game called The Legend of Link, where Zelda's the main character and she's trying to search for Link, the legendary hero. But she ends up becoming the hero in the process.
You know what? I'm gonna give that answer. My favorite version of Zelda is Hyrule Warriors.
Oh. Yeah, having your favorite Zelda be Hyrule Warriors or one of the Smash Brothers games
Yeah.
is maybe the most warrior
That's
like
my
Zelda
most
possible.
satisfying answer. I did like her as a true matriarch in Twilight Princess.
Mm.
The only thing that gets me every time is it literally makes no sense where she disappears in the middle of a plot and reappears just completely with no explanation at the end
I also like the Link
to
Between
do the
Worlds
puppet
Zelda
thing.
because
Yeah.
she's trying to be a responsible ruler, and then when she meets her low rule counterpart Hilda,
Yeah.
they sort of want to help each other, but also they each have their own sort of agenda. I don't want to spoil the very ending of those games, but like seeing two princesses, which is like the opposite of a Spin Doctors song. Um, like seeing two princesses at odds is really interesting in Link Between Worlds. That is part of why the ending to Link Between Worlds is so satisfying.
Yeah, most definitely. I love that ending probably the most.
So, Steph, do you have a favorite or least favorite Ganon that stands out?
I honestly don't like the idea of Ganon anymore. I'm kind of over it. I've loved the way they've depicted him visually. I think it's a gorgeous visual, and I think that's partly why they keep going with it. Because that whole, imposing that fiery red, those, kind of charcoal blacks, those dark yellows and golds are really, really cool looking, but I'm just kind of over the concept.
Um, Yeah, I don't mind his general look or his color palette. My favorite Ganon is probably Wind Waker Ganon, just because
Yeah.
he's so much bigger than Link that he's a really
Yeah.
imposing boss fight. And
It's very stylish looking. I like that he's wearing a kind of robe.
yeah, he's wearing a big robe with that sort of ornately designed, and he fights with cutlasses, make because he's sort of like an evil pirate king for most of the game.
Sort of like an Arabic kind of take on, like a very more interesting take on that Arabic idea, I guess.
Yeah, and I mean, the Arab countries have a long, cool tradition of piracy. Even when you said it alongside like the more Western idea of what seafaring pirates are,
I
but
guess, but I guess that also makes sense too, because like I guess Ocarina of Time, you had the Gerudo who were very obvious, kind of going for that fantasy sand people look, right? But Ganon kind of just didn't look like that.
he
He didn't
also I
really
think
match
he's a
up.
little bit more broad in Wind Waker. He's more barrel chested
He looks,
and not skinny.
yeah, he looks very villain.
Oh yeah,
He just looks like kind of a generic villain wearing a bodysuit.
he kind of is Saturday morning cartoon villain, but I like his look in general in Wind Waker more than in the other games where I've fought Ganon many a time.
I
Nathan,
totally agree.
Nathan, do you have a favorite Ganon or maybe a Ganon you particularly dislike?
I really don't like Breath of the Wild's Ganon, if that even
Yeah,
counts.
that was a phoned in. For a game with such a great visual, I thought that was pretty phoned in. But
Well, plus Ganon has no personality in that game. He's
yeah,
just literally,
none.
I want to destroy, and that's
It's
pretty
just a
much
black
Ganon.
cloud. It's like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
just a mindless beast.
But have you ever seen that like fan art picture of like you know what? It's not even worth getting into. Anyways, yeah, there's like some who have wanted to see like Ganon kind of as a good guy in one of the games, or even just to kind of change up their history from being this less obvious, basic evil
That's Hyrule
entity.
Warriors Ganon.
Yeah,
Kind of.
yeah.
He's, for a little bit.
I don't know.
Zelda needs to have its Super Mario RPG moment where Bowser joins the team as a party, and we just need Ganon fighting alongside Zelda and
Hopefully, if
Link.
Breath of the Wild is like kind of a just a reboot, of sorts. Maybe the next game they'll actually be more feel more safe to try something completely different with the story. I hope.
We went into that a little bit 2 weeks ago, where I think
Did we?
I think I asked the question if Breath of the Wild
Yeah.
is like is the new sort of Zelda standard. Instead of going bigger, do we like the idea of it going weirder, kind of like Ocarina to Majora's Mask? And I think all four people just said, yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, that my opinion still stands on that. I would think we should do something like that.
Yeah, because I mean, Breath of the Wild is already so such a vast, broad game. Going bigger for the next Zelda almost seems like, if not an impossible task, then a very challenging task. Like having them go in a different direction, I think would be a cool move by Nintendo. And we have no idea what is coming next in Zelda. Let's see. We've talked about our favorite Zeldas and Ganons. How about a favorite Link,
Ooh.
or maybe a
Wind
Link
Waker.
that kind of sucks?
It's Wind Waker.
I love the facial expressions on Wind Waker Link. Those are great.
I love Breath of the
Yeah.
Wild Link. I love his hair. I love his new outfits. I like his attitude when he doesn't have any shirt on.
I think
But
that
when
Breath
he's
of,
in a cold environment, he has kind of like some nice facial expressions about the Wild.
I think Breath of the
Yeah.
Wild is like sort of the best version of adult Link, and Wind Waker is the best version of Kid Link in general. I think I don't think that's controversial, but because both of them are portrayed really, really well and are expressive
Actually,
and beautiful.
I sort of like Majora's Mask Link for what I bring into it, where I'm like, this is a person who has lived like to do Ocarina of Time. So he was a kid, then he got transformed into an adult. Now he's a kid again, like kind of dealing with it, dealing with this knowledge that he has about the timeline.
I mean,
And I was like, all right, let's go save Termina now, I guess. you
Majora's
know,
Mask is is basically the Groundhog Day of The Legend of Zelda.
but like you have this already really seasoned warrior, even though he's a kid, and I just think the Majora's Mask Link is probably my favorite for that reason.
But but in Groundhog Day, I mean, when Bill Murray's character is trapped in the same day over and over, possibly hundreds or thousands of times, by the end, he's learned how to play the piano and learned a new language, and it's just this incredibly sophisticated, much better version of himself. And I imagine that Link in Majora's Mask is the same. He's like, I'm trapped in this
Yeah,
cycle, so I might as well just get all the masks and all the
down.
hearts and turn into a superhero.
If you get all the masks, you turn into like an evil version of yourself and just wreck all the bosses of the game.
Yeah. Oh, that is a great final boss sequence. Like for how weird it is. Like when you take an ancient warrior mask against an evil cursed mask, like it's a trip. It's as trippy as it sounds.
Yeah, I'm aware
and
of
it throws
fierce.
every color at you too. Like that whole final boss sequence is just incredibly weird.
It's just trippy.
Colorful.
I'm aware of a fierce deity Link, but I haven't experienced it for myself, of course.
Oh, it's glorious. They really save the whole best for last kind of feeling. I think you can literally only use that mask for that one fight too, right?
You're asking me?
Oh, sorry, and my mom came through the door. I missed the question.
That's okay. The answer is yes.
Okay, yes.
All right, now, Nathan. Now that your mom has left, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. I don't think we addressed it 2 weeks ago, but when we were doing the early voting stuff, you mentioned to me that you had never finished a 2D Zelda game. That you've tried a couple of them, but you never really got to any of them. So, and as a result, if I'm putting words in your mouth, please correct me. That sort of 3D Zelda is what is is sort of your Zelda, and 2D Zelda almost feels like a different kind of game or a different series of games. And for me, the opposite is almost true because I didn't play any 3D Zeldas until I think 2011. So for a long time, and I've been playing Zelda games since the early 90s. So like for most of my Zelda career, 2D Zelda was my Zelda, and the same is true for you, but for 3D. So do you have a specific hang up about 2D Zelda that has gotten in your way, or is it mostly just time and like would you sit down and play as 2D Zelda through to the end, you think, in 2018?
I probably could. It's mostly due to time constraints. When I was growing up, I grew up I was born in the early '90s, so by the time I was like 6 years old, Ocarina of Time was the hot thing. So every single time a Zelda game came out on console, they were always 3D. I didn't really have handhelds at the time, which is where 2D Zelda ended up moving to. So whenever I did get a handheld game, it was mostly Pokemon. So so
So
so
you had handhelds, you just didn't buy any Zelda games for them.
yeah. Well, I was like 8, 9, 10 years old. I didn't have a job, and I was obsessed with Pokemon. So, like anything besides Pokemon on handheld was kind of like alien to me. But yeah, so on consoles, I stuck to the 3D Zelda games. That's where I saw my most play time.
Okay,
Besides
now, Steph, I might need your help for this plan a little bit, but my idea is that we kidnap Mr. Lee. We lock him in a basement, and once he has beaten at least 2 of the Game Boy or DS Zelda games, then he gets to eat.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yep, sounds good. Right, and I didn't. I did basically avoid the 3D Zelda games for a while. I never owned an N64, so I played, or at least observed my friends play Ocarina of Time quite a bit, but at friends' houses. But I didn't play Ocarina of Time until the GameCube version many years later, and right after playing that, I'm like, okay, 3D Zelda isn't so bad, and I finished Wind Waker and Twilight Princess not that long after. So I guess those 3 plus Breath of the Wild, which I'm in the middle of, are the only 3D ones I've played, and I really like all 4 of those. Breath of the Wild is I think the best of the four. But Steph, you might be in the middle because I've heard you praise both 2D and 3D Zelda over the course of two podcasts. Um, and of course each one of them has it's sort of different versions of Zelda tradition and Zelda formula. What do you think is maybe a strength of 2D over 3D and a strength of 3D over 2D for the different games? I know that's an open-ended question, but do your best.
2D is probably a bigger emphasis on level design, and 3D is probably more emphasis on world.
Cool. I mean, it's true. I always love seeing a tightly designed 2D Zelda dungeon. Like it's part of why I was so blown away by Link Between Worlds. But when you say world is a strength of 3D, is it interacting with the world or like the 3D scale of it? Like when you look up at the ceiling of a dungeon.
Yeah, because the whole thing about 3D is that it really literally expands the playing field, right? Because you're kind of taking it on a whole new perspective. But like it's kind of interesting to see how like Zelda was one of the first big action RPGs, and like the whole first dungeon or Mario 64 was designed around helping players get used to a 3D workspace. So I kind of think about that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, for the 2D Zeldas, when you look at the world map, they're all basically a rectangle. And for 3D, even though they're also a rectangle, they feel vaster and feel less like feel less like pieces on a chessboard, I guess, when you're navigating.
But it's weird. I can't say either style is necessarily bad. I've definitely loved both of them, and I just pick them both up unbiasedly. I'll just like, all right, another Zelda, it's mine now.
When I was an asshole teenager, I insisted that 2D Zelda was better than 3D Zelda, but I definitely don't have that feeling anymore.
I like that we all have a different answer for this too.
So now I think it's safe to assume that the next Zelda is also going to be a Switch Zelda, because I think that Nintendo is going to focus on the Switch instead of make a new 3DS.
Well, no, but I do wonder if they'll make like another small scale Zelda. Like, what if they did do?
That was basically what my question was. Like, do you think they might
3DS?
make a Switch 2D Zelda, and do you think that what do you think it could take from Link Between Worlds and Breath of the Wild?
Well, I like the focus on really big focus on indie gaming, and even like what Octopath Traveler is doing. It shows that you can kind of put lower quality looking games. I don't mean it that way, but I mean, yeah, you can definitely really make it work on the Switch. And I think Switch has a same thing, just a very interesting design philosophy behind the games it puts on there.
Yeah, the Switch versions of Celeste and Shantae and stuff. There's a lot of good 2D stuff on the Switch.
Yeah, and I think they're just more about an interesting game than necessarily like if it's a top tier AAA looking game. They don't care about that. They just want your idea to be really good. And I feel like a lot of Zelda games definitely get that across.
Yeah, and I know we've hit on this a bunch of times, but like thinking of what they could do with a 2D Zelda, thinking of how successful and awesome Breath of the Wild is, thinking of how popular the Switch is, all of this makes the idea of what Nintendo might do with their next Zelda just so appetizing. I'm thirsty as hell for a trailer or something, just like giving us the briefest glimpse of the next Zelda. But
yeah,
I haven't been this excited about Zelda. Oh God, I don't know. Maybe since A Link Between Worlds was announced as a sequel to Link to the Past, like, and that was at least 5 years ago. I've not been this hype for Zelda, maybe my entire life, and I've always liked Zelda, but this is the most excited I've ever been for it, and it's because Nintendo is in such a good place right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so exciting to see, because whenever Nintendo does well, they usually put out some of their best stuff.
When Nintendo does Zelda or Mario, they're bringing their A game, and part of why 2017 was so remarkable was that we got big budget Zelda and big budget Mario in the same year, and both of them were. I would say successful.
I feel like most Nintendo games, I think that's why they have the reputation they do, is a labor of love. Like everything about it seems really well thought out.
Yeah, everything just seems just expertly planned and polished, and just has a lot of heart and fun.
One of my favorite things about the Zelda series, hands down, is how their attention to detail and everything. They were one of the first earliest and most frequent games to, like, for example, have if Link is kind of standing on the side, then one of his legs will be higher than the other. Like, it's small little graphical details like that the series really, really remembers to do. Or, they putting in like realistic constellations, or some of the cause and effect things that you can do in Breath of the Wild, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like cutting down trees. How would you go about cutting down trees or making fire? They actually give you items and easy ways to do all that.
They do the Monster Hunter thing where you need cold drinks or
Yeah.
protective clothes from the heat, and vice versa for the cold.
But I
It's
think that's what makes the Zelda series fun is that it feels like a very hands-on game. Like, you have a
oh
whole
yeah.
arsenal of tools to solve puzzles with, and I think that's really fun for players on a very basic sense. It's not just like get a better sword, it's get a the better tool for the job.
I mean, like we said at the very beginning of this podcast, like what we love about Zelda are the tightly designed maps and dungeons, the feeling of progress as you go from nothing to to a superhero by the end, and all of its attention to detail in sound design and art design. It's a very special series, and all three of us have different feelings about it, and each of the three of us would answer what is Zelda differently. But
Yeah.
that's part of why it's great and why it's special. So, I think it's about time to roll up the carpet here. This has been episode 132 of Retro Encounter. Thank you, listeners, for staying with us, ramble and rant about Zelda for an hour plus. And thank
I
you,
had a lot of
Stefan.
fun just talking random things about it actually, because there's just a lot of things to
Yeah,
pick apart, I guess.
we could go
Much
another
things
we
to
could
talk
go
about.
another hour, I think. But I'm trying to like keep certain limits to podcast length and pace that I'm always worried about whenever I record. So if I ever sound confused or stressed, it's because I'm always confused or stressed. That's my secret, like Bruce Banner style.
I'm always stressed.
That's my secret. That's my secret cap. I'm always stressed. But thank you, Steph, and thank you, Nathan, for chatting with me for so long about this. But listeners, we're going to talk about the future of Retro Encounter briefly. In next week, we are going to discuss The Legend of Zelda: The Minish Cap, the game I'm playing as recently as 15 minutes before this podcast recording began. Chris and I are going to be breaking down that one. The Minish Cap won a fan vote that we held in February for an episode that we would be covering, and we are going to deliver on that. I want to say 2/3 of the way through the game, maybe around 75%, so I should be able to finish it in time. And coming after that in May, we have planned a couple episodes out. The game for May, the official 2-episode game for the month of May, is Super Mario RPG: Legend of the Seven Stars. That game is excellent. Nathan might not like it because it's in 2D, but
I love that game actually, but
whatever.
I haven't finished it, so I
I
haven't put
thought
myself on
so.
the track
Yeah,
for it.
That's a good
yeah.
game.
But anyway, that I love that game a lot, and one of the panelists for those 2 episodes is playing Mario RPG for the first time, so I'm very excited to hear her thoughts on it. And we're also doing a slightly negative episode right after the first Mario RPG episode, because I mean, mostly in Retro Encounter, we're celebratory, we're enthusiastic, we're fans of the games that we're talking about, but we're gonna have a slightly negative episode in early May that I will not say the title of right just quite yet. But listeners, if you want to reach out to us, the best way to do so is via email to email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on the rpgfan.com boards, visit the RPG Fan Facebook page, check out RPG Fancom on Twitter, where Steph is one of the people most likely to be responding to your messages. And also leave us reviews on iTunes or Google Play or wherever you find us. There's also an RPG Fan Discord where I'm not sure if you need an invite to it, but if you just go to the rpgfan.com front page, you'll find a link to the Discord, and if you need an invite, we can set you up. We also have streamers that are streaming video game stuff on twitch.tv basically every evening. So if you check the schedule on rpgfan.com, you'll see who's playing what game in a particular week. But however you can reach out to us or connect to us, please do so. Please give us feedback. Please give us constructive criticism. We read everything
Constructive
directed
compliments.
to us. I will accept compliments or insults as long as they're constructive and not a Sollosi, you gotta play Kingdom Hearts variety. So,
Nothing's ever gonna go away.
I have gotten some messages about that, but not enough to actually motivate me to play Kingdom Hearts. But we'll see. I'm never gonna totally shut the door on Retro Encounter playing Kingdom Hearts, but I do not think it will happen soon. But starting with you, Nathan, how can fans reach out to you on social media?
All right, so you can find me at SmashKing27 on Twitter, or if you want to follow me on my Twitch, it's twitch.tv/SmashKing25. There we go. I can't talk today.
It's
I'm
okay.
done talking today.
That makes 2 of us because I've been stumbling over words for this entire podcast. But Steph, same to you. How can listeners find you?
You can find me at Dice SMS on most places: Twitter, Insta, I don't know, Facebook, a whole bunch of places. Yeah, so Dice SMS, and yeah, I'll be responding to you on social media.
Oh, that reminds me. You mentioned that that was your Instagram name. RPG Fan's been expanding into Instagram recently, haven't we?
Yeah, that's right. We have been expanding into Instagram. If you search us on Instagram, RPG Fan com, I believe. Yeah, it's just, yeah, I always forget if there's a dot in there, but yeah, RPG Fan com at Instagram. There I'm actually posting sort of little, kind of less newsy stuff and more just kind of cool RPG images and pictures and just stuff enthusiasts will like for sure.
Very cool. And also, one last thing I want to mention. We have been doing an ongoing Zelda feature through the month of April. We hadn't finished it yet when we were recording the first 2 episodes of Zelda Month, so I didn't mention it then. But by now, there should be at least one mini feature. I believe it's called. I believe it's called Hyrule Highlights. We were a little.
Oh, that's, we went crazy.
We were a little bit crazy naming this thing, but if you go to I don't know when you're listening to this episode, listeners, so it could be months ago from what I know. So if you go to rpgfan.com, go to the features page, then you browse through our many features that we've done over the years. There should be some April 2018 bits that are a collection of short essays and blurbs about our favorite things of the different of Zelda in general. I think I wrote a blurb on the boomerang in Link's Awakening and Maya Mai's in A Link Between Worlds. And Nathan, would you remember one of the blurbs that you wrote?
I wrote a couple of boss battles, and I think one of the dungeons, I believe. I can't remember off the top of my
Cool.
head right now.
And Steph, do you remember one or two of the things you wrote for the feature? Because I know you were one of it. Steph, you were one of this feature's architects.
Yeah, I wrote a lot. I wrote a lot actually about quite a few characters and songs, so I think that's something we couldn't really talk about here, or didn't. Oh, we should have talked about music.
We
Oh my
talked about
God,
music. We talked about music a little bit.
a
But
little
okay, before we
bit.
sign off, just not your number one overall favorite. Nathan, give me one cool Zelda song that you like.
Ooh.
One is from my childhood, so I always remember this one. Song of Storms. So those are one of my favorites.
I
Right on.
whistle that sometimes.
Steph,
Yeah.
Steph, you have a cool Zelda song that you like?
Zora's Domain.
I really like the Kakariko Village music from A Link to the Past and the Low Rule music in A Link Between Worlds. Those two are both awesome. Maybe I
Those are
should
good
use
choices.
maybe I should use one of those for the ending to this podcast. I don't
A
know.
lot of forest themes have actually been pretty solid.
Yeah, there's a lot of good Zelda music, and but there's a lot of good Zelda stuff in general. So listeners, please look up that RPG fan feature. It's I think we're dividing it into a couple mini features, and you can find them on rpgfan.com in the features section from April 2018. So that's a lot of Zelda we've gone over in this podcast. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Steph. Thank you, Nathan. Good night and good luck.
Da 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 da.